The wind howled through the dense Montana pines like a grieving mother, carrying with it a bone-chilling frost that promised death to anything left unprotected in the wilderness. On the side of a desolate, gravel-strewn road, the darkness was absolute, save for the pale moonlight illuminating a tragedy that would break the hardest of hearts. Bella, a once majestic golden retriever, lay crumpled in the freezing mud, her body shattered and her spirit fading. She had been struck by a callous driver who didn't even tap the brakes, leaving her with paralyzed hind legs and a universe of pain. Her golden fur, usually a beacon of sunshine, was matted with blood and the grime of the road, and her breathing was shallow, a ragged rhythm marking the final moments of a life betrayed by humanity. But Bella was not alone in this frozen hellscape, and that was the only reason her heart was still beating. Standing over her broken body was Toby, a 3-month-old puppy who weighed no more than a bag of sugar but possessed the spirit of a lion. He was trembling violently, not just from the biting cold that gnawed at his tiny bones, but from the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He pressed his small, warm body against his mother's neck, whining softly, trying to share his limited warmth with her rapidly cooling frame. Every few seconds he would lick the tears from her snout, his whimpers translating into a universal language of desperation. "Mama, please get up, you have to get up." Suddenly the scent of death drew a shadow from the tree line. A red fox, gaunt and driven by the approaching winter famine, stepped onto the road, its yellow eyes locking onto the helpless mother. In the wild, weakness is an invitation, and Bella was an easy meal. The predator snarled, inching closer, expecting the puppy to flee in terror. But Toby didn't run. Instead, he planted his tiny paws in the gravel, baring milk teeth that looked ridiculous against the predator's fangs. He let out a high-pitched, ferocious growl, placing himself directly between the monster and his mother. It was a suicide mission, a baby standing against a killer, driven by a love so pure it defied the laws of nature. The fox lunged, snapping its jaws, expecting the puppy to scatter, but Toby launched himself forward with a fearlessness that shocked the wild beast. He was a blurred ball of golden fluff, nipping at the fox's nose, barking with a fury that echoed through the valley. Bella tried to lift her head, a low moan escaping her throat, her eyes filled with terror not for herself but for her baby. She was watching her son fight a war he couldn't win, sacrificing his safety to buy her a few more minutes of life. It was a heartbreaking display of loyalty that proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that animals possess souls deeper and more courageous than most humans could ever hope to have. Just as the fox prepared for a lethal strike, blinding beams of light cut through the oppressive darkness. Elias, a 70-year-old rancher with hands weathered by decades of hard labor and a heart softened by faith, was navigating his battered pickup truck down the treacherous mountain pass. He was exhausted, aching for the warmth of his fireplace, when he saw the commotion on the roadside. At first he thought it was raccoons fighting over trash, but as he slowed down, the scene resolved into a nightmare. He saw the tiny puppy bristling and snapping at a predator 3 times its size, refusing to give an inch of ground. "Good Lord," Elias whispered, slamming on his brakes, his heart lurching in his chest. The screech of tires and the glare of the headlights startled the fox, sending it scurrying back into the safety of the dark woods. Elias threw the door open, grabbing his heavy flashlight and stepping out into the biting wind, his breath forming clouds of steam. He expected the puppy to run away too, to disappear into the brush now that the threat was gone. But what happened next brought tears to the old man's eyes. As soon as the fox vanished, Toby stopped growling. He turned, looked at Elias with eyes that held the weight of the world, and then collapsed against his mother's neck, letting out a cry that sounded agonizingly like a human child sobbing for help. Elias approached slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel, speaking in a low, rumbling voice designed to soothe terrified creatures. "Easy there, little one. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm a friend." When he shone the light on Bella, the full extent of the horror was revealed. Her back legs were twisted at an unnatural angle, and her eyes were glazed over, staring past him into the void. She didn't even flinch when he approached. She had accepted her fate. But Toby crawled toward Elias's boots, licking the leather, then ran back to his mum, looking back and forth frantically. He was begging. He was showing the human exactly what was wrong, pleading for a miracle when all hope seemed lost. The old rancher knelt in the mud, disregarding the pain in his arthritic knees. He gently placed a calloused hand on Bella's head, and for the first time, she blinked, focusing on his face. It was a connection of souls, a silent exchange where she handed over the burden of survival to him. "You poor girl," Elias choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "What kind of monster left you here to die like this?" The abstract villains of this story, cruelty, indifference, and the freezing temperature were closing in. The thermometer was dropping rapidly, and Bella's shallow breathing indicated shock. If he didn't act immediately, the cold would finish what the car had started. But the rescue was not going to be simple. Bella was a large dog, dead weight due to her paralysis, and Elias was an old man with a bad back. The ditch was steep, slick with black ice, and every movement caused Bella to whimper in agony. The wind picked up, howling louder, as if the mountain itself was trying to claim them. Toby stood by Elias's hand, shivering violently now that the adrenaline was fading, looking up at the old man with an expression of absolute trust. He had done his part. He had fought off the beast. Now, he was entrusting his mother's life to this stranger, who smelled of tobacco and kindness. Elias looked from the brave puppy to the broken mother and made a silent vow to the Almighty. He would not leave them here. Not tonight. Not ever. He unbuttoned his heavy flannel jacket, preparing to wrap the puppy in it. But his eyes were fixed on Bella. The situation was critical. The odds were stacked against them, and the night was only getting colder. This was the beginning of a battle not against a fox, but against death itself. Are you crying yet? This brave puppy was ready to give his life for his mom. If you believe angels come in all shapes and sizes, please subscribe to our channel right now. Let's pray together that Elias can save them before it's too late. God bless everyone who helps an animal in need. Elias knew that good intentions alone wouldn't lift a 70-pound dog with a shattered spine up a frozen, muddy embankment. He stepped back toward his truck, rummaging through the cluttered bed until his fingers curled around a piece of plywood he used for ranch repairs. It wasn't a medical stretcher, but out here in the unforgiving wilderness, it was the only hope they had. The wind was picking up, slicing through his heavy coat like a knife, turning his breath into ragged clouds of white steam. He looked back at the pair. Bella's eyes were closing, her body surrendering to the hypothermia that was slowly shutting down her organs. Every second wasted was a step closer to a tragedy that Elias refused to accept. He slid down the embankment, his boots skidding on the frost-slicked grass, landing heavily on his knees beside the dogs. Bella let out a low, warning growl, not out of aggression, but out of sheer, blinding pain. She was terrified. To her, this human was just another giant shadow in a night full of monsters. She tried to drag herself backward, her front paws clawing uselessly at the dirt, while her paralyzed hind legs trailed behind her like dead weight. The sight broke Elias's heart. "I know, girl, I know it hurts," he whispered, his voice trembling. "But if we stay here, the cold will take you both. You have to trust me." Toby, sensing the rising tension, began to panic. He bounced between Elias and Bella, barking sharp, high-pitched yaps that pierced the night air. The puppy was confused. He wanted the nice man to help, but he couldn't stand seeing his mother in distress. He nipped at Elias's sleeve, then licked Bella's face, trying to broker a peace treaty between the savior and the victim. Elias froze, letting the puppy sniff his hand, offering his scent as a promise of safety. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a strip of beef jerky, tearing off a small piece. He offered it to Toby. First, the puppy hesitated, his stomach rumbling before snatching it and swallowing it whole. Seeing her baby eat without being harmed changed something in Bella's eyes. The feral fear began to recede, replaced by a desperate, pleading look of submission. Elias moved slowly, sliding the plywood board next to her broken body. This was the most dangerous moment. If she thrashed, she could sever her spinal cord completely. If she bit him, he might drop her. "All right, Mama. We're going to do this." "Together," Elias murmured, essentially praying aloud. He placed one hand under her chest and the other under her hips. As soon as he applied pressure, Bella let out a scream so agonizing it echoed off the canyon walls, a sound of pure torture that made Elias flinch. For a heartbeat, disaster struck. Startled by her own pain, Bella convulsed violently, her upper body twisting away from Elias. The movement threw her off balance on the slope, and she began to slide backward toward the deeper ravine, dragging the plywood with her. "No!" Elias roared, lunging forward. He caught her by the scruff of her neck just inches before she tumbled into the darkness below. His shoulder screamed in protest, his old joints popping, but he held on with a grip of iron. It was a near miss that left both man and dog panting, their hearts hammering against their ribs in a synchronized rhythm of terror. Elias stayed there for a moment, holding her tight, letting his own heartbeat calm hers. He stroked her matted head, disregarding the mud soaking into his jeans. "I've got you. I won't let you fall," he promised, his voice thick with tears. Bella stopped fighting. She realized, perhaps through instinct or divine intervention, that this struggle was necessary for her survival. She went limp in his arms, a total surrender of will. She exhaled a long, shuddering breath and rested her heavy head on Elias's forearm, licking the fabric of his jacket. The pact was sealed. She was putting her life entirely in his trembling hands. With the patience of a saint, Elias maneuvered her onto the board. He took off his belt and gently secured her torso to the wood, creating a makeshift harness to prevent another fall. Toby watched intently, his head cocked to the side, understanding that the big operation was underway. The puppy scampered up the hill to the roadside, barking encouragingly, as if telling them the path was clear. Elias grabbed the edge of the board. He gritted his teeth, summoned the strength of a man half his age, and began to heave. It was a grueling inch-by-inch battle against gravity and mud. Halfway up the slope, Elias's foot slipped on a patch of black ice. He went down to one knee, the weight of the board threatening to pull him back down. Pain shot through his bad back like a lightning bolt, blinding and hot. He gasped, seeing spots in his vision. He could have let go. He could have walked away. But then he looked up and saw Toby at the top of the ridge, whining, looking down with those big, trusting puppy eyes, and he looked at Bella, who was staring up at him, silent and waiting. "Not today, Lord, not today," Elias grunted. He dug his boots into the earth, finding a leverage that came from pure adrenaline, and pushed upward with a mighty groan. With one final lung-burning effort, Elias crested the edge of the road, dragging the board onto the gravel. He collapsed for a second, wheezing, his chest heaving, sweat freezing on his forehead. They were out of the ditch. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring his screaming muscles, and lowered the tailgate of his truck. Lifting Bella into the bed was the final hurdle. He wrapped his arms under the board, lifted with his legs, and slid her onto the cold metal, immediately covering her with the heavy wool blankets he kept for emergencies. She was safe from the ground, but she was shivering so violently that the whole truck seemed to vibrate. Toby didn't wait for an invitation. He scrambled up the tire and leaped into the truck bed, diving under the blankets to press himself against his mother's belly. The reunion was instantaneous and heart-wrenching. Bella, despite her agony, nudged the puppy with her nose, checking him for injuries, her tail giving a tiny, weak thump against the truck bed, the first sign of hope. Elias watched them for a second, wiping a tear from his cheek with a dirty hand. He slammed the tailgate shut, sealing them in safety, but a cold dread settled in his stomach. Bella's gums were pale, almost white. The rescue on the mountain was over, but the fight for her life was just beginning. Elias jumped into the driver's seat and fired up the engine, cranking the heater to the maximum. He checked the rearview mirror, seeing only the mound of blankets in the back. He put the truck in gear and floored the gas pedal, tires spinning on the gravel before catching traction. He wasn't driving like a retired rancher anymore. He was driving like an ambulance. The nearest emergency vet was 40 minutes away, down winding mountain roads. "Hang on, sweet girl," he said to the empty cab, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "Just hang on a little longer. Don't you dare give up on me now." As the truck sped through the night, the reality of the situation began to set in. Bella wasn't just cold and broken, she was fading. The adrenaline that had kept her alive during the standoff with the fox was gone, leaving her body to crash. Elias knew that getting her off the mountain was the easy part. The real villain was internal bleeding or spinal shock, silent killers that no amount of blankets could fix. He prayed with every turn of the wheel, asking for green lights and a miracle. The radio crackled with static, but the only sound that mattered was the silence from the back of the truck. Miles flew by, but time seemed to stand still. Elias kept glancing back, terrified that he would arrive with a corpse. He talked to them. Through the rear window, his voice loud and reassuring. "We're almost there, just a few more miles." He was trying to keep them awake, trying to keep Bella tethered to this world by the sound of his voice alone. The lights of the small town finally appeared on the horizon, a glowing beacon in the pitch-black void. It felt like a finish line, but Elias knew it was just the entrance to the next battlefield. He pulled into the parking lot of the veterinary clinic, screeching to a halt right in front of the glass doors. The clinic was closed for regular hours, but the emergency light was on. Elias didn't even turn off the engine. He jumped out, rushing to the back, and threw open the tailgate. Toby popped his head out, barking a greeting, but Bella didn't move. She lay perfectly still under the wool, her eyes closed, her breathing imperceptible. Elias's heart stopped. Had he been too late? Had the brave mother fought off a fox only to die in the safety of a warm blanket? He scooped up, the board again, rushing toward the clinic doors, kicking them open with his boot. "Help! I need help here!" he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. A young vet technician looked up from the desk, her eyes widening at the sight of the frantic old man and the broken dog. The smell of wet fur, mud, and iron-rich blood filled the sterile waiting room. Elias placed the board on the floor, falling to his knees beside it. He pulled back the blanket. Bella took a ragged, gasping breath. She was alive, but barely. The fight was far from over. Are you rooting for this angel? Your like helps save more lives. Subscribe to support our mission. Now let's see if she survives. The sliding glass doors of the clinic had barely settled when Dr. Miller, the emergency veterinarian, rushed out from the back, alerted by the commotion. He took one look at the bloody, shivering heap on the plywood board, and his professional mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing pure shock. "Get the gurney now," he barked to the vet tech, his voice cutting through the sterile silence. They lifted Bella with practiced efficiency, but every jostle drew a low, guttural moan from deep within her chest. It was the sound of a creature clinging to life by a thread. Elias stood there, his hands trembling and covered in mud, watching as the double doors swallowed the only family he had left. Left alone in the blindingly bright waiting room, the silence was heavier than the mountain air. Elias sank into a plastic chair, his knees finally giving out under the weight of the night's trauma. Toby, who had been frantic moments before, now sat perfectly still at Elias's feet, staring intensely at the door where his mother had disappeared. The puppy let out a high-pitched whimper that sounded like a question. "Is she coming back?" Elias reached down, burying his rough fingers in Toby's soft fur. "She's in good hands, little buddy. She's strong. She's the strongest girl I know," he lied, trying to convince himself as much as the dog. Minutes stretched into an agonizing hour. The clock on the wall ticked with a rhythmic mockery, each second amplifying the dread in Elias's gut. From behind the closed doors, he could hear muffled voices, the beep of monitors, and the clatter of metal instruments, the chaotic soundtrack of a battle between life and death. Elias pulled the small wooden cross from his shirt, clutching it until the edges dug into his palm. He wasn't a man who asked for much, but tonight he was bargaining with the heavens. "Take my truck, take the ranch, just don't let that pup grow up an orphan," he whispered, his eyes squeezed shut against the harsh fluorescent lights. Finally, Dr. Miller emerged, looking like he had just gone 10 rounds in a boxing ring. He pulled off his surgical cap, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. His expression was grim, the universal look of a doctor bearing bad news. Elias stood up, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Give it to me straight, Doc," the old rancher said, bracing himself for the impact. The vet sighed, looking down at his clipboard as if searching for a silver lining that wasn't there. "It's bad, Elias. Very bad. She's a fighter, but the damage is catastrophic." The impact from the car shattered her pelvis in 3 places, Dr. Miller explained, his voice steady but grave. "But the broken bones aren't the immediate threat. She has severe internal bleeding and a ruptured spleen. Her body temperature was critical when she came in. She was minutes away from cardiac arrest due to hypothermia." The abstract villain had taken a physical form, a trifecta of trauma that made survival statistically impossible. The vet paused, meeting Elias's eyes. "Surgery is her only chance, but she's so weak. I can't guarantee she'll survive the anesthesia. It's a gamble." Elias didn't hesitate for a microsecond. He didn't ask about the cost, which he knew would wipe out his savings for the year. He didn't ask about the odds. He looked down at Toby, who was thumping his tail hopefully, sensing the attention. "Do it!" Elias commanded, his voice regaining the steel of his youth. "Do whatever you have to do to save her. I don't care about the money, just bring her back to us." Dr. Miller nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. He turned and disappeared back into the operating room. The gamble was on. The next 3 hours were a blur of torture for the old man and the puppy. Inside the operating room, it was a war zone. Bella's blood pressure plummeted twice. The monitors screamed their high-pitched warnings, signaling that her heart was fluttering, struggling to pump against the massive loss of blood. Dr. Miller worked with frantic precision, his hands moving inside the open cavity of her abdomen, racing against the clock to clamp the bleeders. It was a gory, high-stakes ballet. At one point, the line on the monitor went flat. The room went silent. "We're losing." "Her!" a tech shouted. In the waiting room, Toby suddenly stood up and ran to the door, scratching at the wood with frantic energy. He began to bark, not a playful bark, but a desperate, mournful call. It was as if he felt the exact moment his mother's spirit began to drift away. Elias felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. He scooped the puppy up, holding him tight against his chest. "Pray with me, Toby," he whispered. Inside, Dr. Miller was performing chest compressions, pumping Bella's heart manually. "Come on, girl, don't you quit on that baby," the vet yelled, refusing to accept defeat. And then a miracle happened. A faint, rhythmic beep returned to the monitor. It was weak, erratic, but it was there. Bella's heart, fueled perhaps by the distant cries of her son or the sheer stubborn will of a mother, kicked back into gear. She wasn't ready to leave. The bleeding was stopped, the spleen removed, and the jagged bones were stabilized with temporary fixtures. She had looked death in the face and growled, just like her son had growled at the fox. Dr. Miller stepped back, exhaling a breath he felt he had been holding for hours. "She's back," he whispered, wiping sweat from his brow. When the doors opened again, the sun was just beginning to crest over the mountains outside, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. Elias had fallen asleep in the chair, Toby curled in his lap. Dr. Miller gently touched the old man's shoulder. Elias jerked awake, panic instantly flooding his eyes. "Is she—" he started, unable to finish the sentence. The vet smiled, a tired but genuine smile that transformed the entire room. "She made it, Elias. It was touch and go, but she's stable. She's the toughest dog I've ever seen." Elias let out a sob that racked his entire body, the tension of the night finally breaking. He buried his face in his hands, weeping tears of pure relief. Toby, sensing the change in energy, began to lick Elias's ears, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. They were tears of victory. The long night was over. "Can we see her?" Elias asked, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "Just for a minute," the vet cautioned. "She's very groggy." They walked into the recovery area, a quiet room filled with the hum of warming blankets and IV pumps. Bella lay in a large kennel, hooked up to tubes and fluids, her body wrapped in bandages. She looked small and fragile, a stark contrast to the majestic creature she was meant to be. But as they approached, her nose twitched. She smelled them. Slowly, heavily, her eyelids fluttered open. They were hazy with drugs, but there was recognition there. She tried to lift her head but couldn't, so she settled for a soft, rhythmic thump of her tail against the bedding. Elias opened the cage door just enough to let Toby in. The reunion was not chaotic. It was sacred. The puppy didn't jump or play. He crawled onto the blankets with the gentleness of a nurse, curling up, directly under Bella's chin. Bella let out a deep sigh, closing her eyes again, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from peace. She was warm, she was safe, and her baby was back in her arms. Elias watched them, feeling his heart swell 2 sizes. The crisis had passed, but looking at Bella's shattered body, he knew the road ahead would be long. The vet checked the charts one last time. "She's going to need months of rehabilitation, Elias. She might never walk normally again. It's going to be a lot of work." Elias looked at the pair sleeping in the kennel, the battered mother and the warrior son. He thought about his empty ranch, his quiet life, and the loneliness that had plagued him for years. "Doc," Elias said, a smile cracking his weathered face. "I've got nothing but time. We're going to fix her up. You just watch." As they left the clinic to let Bella rest, the morning light hit the snow-covered peaks, making them shine like diamonds. The world looked different now. It was no longer a place of darkness and predators, but a place of second chances. The villain Abstrato of death had been defeated by the scalpel of a surgeon and the prayers of a rancher. But as Elias walked to his truck, he knew the final test was yet to come. Healing the body was one thing. Healing the trauma and watching Bella bloom into her true self was the final chapter they had yet to write. Who abandoned this angel deserves no forgiveness. But look at God's work. She survived the impossible. If you are crying happy tears, type Amen in the comments to bless her recovery. Don't forget to subscribe to see her incredible transformation in the next part. Winter slowly retreated from the Montana mountains, replaced by the vibrant greens of a hard-won spring, mirroring the miraculous season of healing unfolding inside Elias's ranch. The recovery wasn't a sprint. It was a marathon of patience and grit. For weeks, Bella's world was a mix of physical therapy sessions and soft groans of frustration as she tried to command legs that refused to listen. Elias transformed his living room into a rehabilitation center, using towels to support her hips, walking her step by agonizing step across the hardwood floors. He spoke to her constantly, his voice a steady drumbeat of encouragement. "You can do this, Mama, one more step." And Toby, ever the faithful sidekick, would trot alongside them, nudging her paws with his nose as if to say, "Move it like this, Mom." Then came the day that changed everything, the glow-up that every rescue story dreams of. Elias ordered a custom-built canine wheelchair, a sleek set of wheels designed to replace her broken back half. The first time he strapped her into the harness, Bella looked confused, turning her head to inspect the metal contraption clinging to her flanks. But the moment Elias opened the front door and the scent of fresh pine hit her nose, instinct took over. She pushed with her powerful front legs, and instead of dragging, she rolled. Her eyes widened in sheer disbelief. She wasn't paralyzed anymore, she was mobile. She took off down the driveway, her chariot gleaming in the sun, moving faster than she had in months. The transformation was nothing short of biblical. The emaciated, mud-caked creature that had been pulled from the ditch was gone. In her place stood a queen. Her fur had grown back thick and lustrous, a deep, burnished gold that seemed to catch every ray of sunlight. She had gained 20 pounds of healthy weight, hiding her ribs under a layer of muscle and softness. Her eyes, once clouded with the milky glaze of shock and pain, were now crystal clear, sparkling with mischief and intelligence. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a brand new dog who had just discovered the fountain of youth. Toby had undergone his own transformation. No longer the tiny, trembling fluffball who fought a fox. He had grown into a strapping young dog with a chest like a barrel and a bark that could shake the windows. He was Bella's legs when she wasn't in her chair, and her racing partner when she was. Watching them play in the tall grass was pure medicine for the soul. Bella would zoom in circles, her wheels kicking up dust, while Toby chased her, tackling her gently and rolling in the wildflowers. They played with the reckless abandon of creatures who knew they had cheated death, soaking up every second of a life they almost lost. The psychological healing was just as profound as the physical one. The fear of humans, the flinching when a hand was raised, the terror of loud noises had evaporated. Bella realized that in this house, hands were only used for scratching behind ears and dispensing treats. She appointed herself as Elias's personal shadow and guardian. If he sat in his rocking chair on the porch, she parked her wheels right beside him, resting her chin on his knee. If a delivery truck came up the drive, she let out a deep, authoritative bark, not out of fear, but out of duty. She was the matriarch of the ranch, protecting the man who had saved her with the same ferocity she had for her puppy. One Sunday afternoon, the ultimate scene of redemption played out on the porch. Elias fired up the grill, the smell of sizzling meat drifting through the valley. He wasn't just cooking for himself. He threw 3 thick steaks on the fire. When they were done, he cut 2 of them into bite-sized pieces and placed them in ceramic bowls. "Bon appétit, my friends," he said. Setting the feast down, Bella and Toby ate with gusto, their tails wagging in a synchronized rhythm. It was a far cry from the freezing mud and the gnawing hunger of that fateful night. This was a family dinner, filled with warmth, safety, and the kind of love that money can't buy. As for the person who hit her and drove away, the invisible villain, their fate remains a mystery, But karma has a way of settling scores. While that person likely lives with a hollow heart and a guilty conscience, Bella is living the life of royalty. The best revenge is a life well lived, and Bella is living the best life imaginable. She sleeps on an orthopedic memory foam bed by the fireplace, eats better than most humans, and is loved beyond measure. The cruelty of one human was erased by the kindness of another, proving that for every monster, there is a guardian angel waiting in the wings. The story ends where it should, in peace. As the sun sets behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of violet, Elias sits on his porch swing, a mug of coffee in hand. Bella is out of her chair, resting on a thick rug, while Toby snoozes with his head on her flank. Elias looks down at them, his old heart full to bursting. He saved them, yes, but in the quiet moments of the night he knows the truth. They saved him right back. They filled his empty house with life and his silent days with purpose. This journey from the frozen roadside to the warmth of a forever home is a testament to the resilience of the animal spirit. Bella didn't just survive, she conquered. She proved that broken bones heal, scars fade, and love is the most powerful force in the universe. Her golden coat shines as a beacon of hope for every animal waiting for their miracle. She is no longer the victim on the side of the road. She is Bella, the golden warrior, and she is finally home. Who abandoned this angel deserves punishment, but look at her now. She is living proof that love heals all wounds. Question: do you think the driver who hit her will ever find peace? Tell us in the comments. Please leave a like if you believe every dog deserves a second chance, and comment Amen to bless Bella, Toby, and Elias. Don't forget to share this story to inspire others.